Welcome to the Afterlight Podcast with me, Lauren Grace, a spiritual podcast full of stories and conversations that prove we're never alone. The Afterlight Podcast aims to inspire and educate. Remember, you are the authority on your own life. I encourage you to run everything through your own filter, to take what resonates, and I also urge you to do your own research and consult with qualified professionals for advice on your personal situation. The opinions shared by guests are their own, and any advice by our guests or by me is not a substitute for professional guidance. Thank you so much for listening, and I enjoy journeying back with you to the afterlight. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Lauren Grace here. Welcome to the Afterlight Podcast, and I'm joined today by Brandy Anderson. Brandy is a spiritual director, a Jungian coach, and a Silver Nautilus award-winning author of Through the Veil, A Glimpse into the Afterlife. As the founder of Anderson Alchemy, Brandy guides others through the transformative process of shadow work, spiritual awakening, and inner alchemy, helping seekers integrate the mystical and the psychological into everyday life. And Brandy is joining me today. We're going to be talking about connecting with past over loved ones, exploring the afterlife, and we'll see what else comes up. Brandy, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lauren. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I love your accent, girl. Where are you from originally?
Alabama. Yeah. And I'm
good.
Around the Auburn, Alabama area. Yeah.
All right. Well, something tells me you might have first dabbled in maybe in the church, but we'll find out about that, I'm sure, in a moment. So where did your spiritual journey begin, sister?
Yeah. So I was raised in a Christian family, although I really wasn't practicing any form of religion. And around 2014, I had a spiritual awakening. And at that time, it just kind of compelled me to plug into some churches because that was the context that I was coming from, being raised in a Christian family. And so from there, I did really immerse myself in the church for quite a few years. And ultimately, I came to the end of all of that seeking and reading and studying and wrestling. And I just found mainstream Christian answers to life's most important questions less than satisfying. And so that kind of compelled me into a more mystical way of seeing and being in the world, more of a contemplative place.
Yes. I think you said a key word there, which was wrestling. When I often think of religion, I think of, structure. I think of do this and don't do that. I think of, looking outside of yourself for the answers. And I don't know about you in terms of your spirituality, but for me, my spirituality, I feel sings when I find the answers from within, when I learn tools and tips and techniques, and then I check in with myself and go, how does this feel? Try it on for size. Would you say that's where you kind of felt that maybe there was a disconnect there?
Yes, absolutely. Because so much of the church is about keeping people disconnected from themselves. The heart is deceitful above all things, they'll tell you. Don't trust yourself. Right? And but ultimately, the higher self, the self, is the part of you that is guiding you along. It's that still small voice within that guides us. And so I definitely felt that disconnect, and it definitely has been more resonant. Being in that contemplative space where I do listen to that still small voice within myself. Yeah, for sure.
So you were saying that your spiritual journey began and then you were getting into, exploring some of the churches around you. What do you think kind of triggered that? Was there something that happened? Were you thinking about, what happens when we die? Was it a passage that you read, your family? Did you pray at meals and you're like, what is this about? Who are we praying to?
Yeah. No, actually, nothing profound was going on in my life at the time. I was just living my life, but then a sudden depression sort of descended upon me and it would not relent. And I am not one that has ever been given to like depression, like clinical depression. And now I know in retrospect that it was an existential depression, to be sure. But at the time, I really wasn't sure what was happening. I just knew that I had this profound heaviness and I couldn't shake it. And I kept thinking, well, it'll pass because things are cyclical, seasonal, but it didn't. It just pressed in harder and heavier as the days went on. And one morning I woke up and I remember thinking, I just can't take this anymore. And I cried out to God, and it wasn't, a pious prayer by any stretch of the imagination. It was more provocative, if anything. It was more of an "if you are there" kind of prayer. And I just
Ah,
started unleashing all of my frustrations into the atmosphere, hoping something might shift. And in the midst of all of that turmoil, that inner chaos, I heard a voice as loud and clear as anything I've ever heard before in my life. And the voice just said, "Be still." And it arrested me. Complete peace washed over me and just silenced me in that moment. And at the time, I didn't even realize that was a verse. Be still and know that I am God.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was so disconnected from church that I didn't even realize that it was a verse. But the voice itself, just peace, just total instant peace. And I remember thinking, this is God, and I need a context for what has happened to me. I need something to hang this experience on. And so that's when I sort of, pressed into the church looking for answers at that point.
Mm. And then you didn't find them necessarily, or did you find some of the answers, but then you were questioning? Because one of the things I saw that you do online is you do talk about some of the teachings, and then you kind of share almost your perspective or a different way of looking at that teaching.
Yeah, for me, I really didn't find the answers. I mean, I found a lot of mainstream Christian answers, but as I said before, they really didn't tie up those loose ends or connect those theological dots that I needed connecting because I had an experience. I think that that's the difference between myself and a lot of people. I had this experience first. And so then I plugged into the church trying to make sense of that experience. And so everything just sort of fell short. The peace that I had experienced in that moment, nothing in the church sort of provided that kind of peace, that kind of
Mm.
experiential awareness of the divine. And so it was only when I shifted away and began to like reinterpret the scriptures in a more contemplative, more mystical way that I was able to, make sense of things in an experiential sort of way.
I love that. It's almost that moment where you go, oh, wait a minute, I think thoughts. Like you can become the observer for a moment. And then it's almost those times where you go, that feeling of peace, because I've had experiences in my life where I've been quiet in my mind. And it's just like, oh, just the relief of that, and that's not normally maybe how my mind operates. I tend to have a commentary that's running there quite often.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're relating to, where you're going, I felt awash with peace and I was
Yeah.
looking to recreate that feeling again?
Yeah, I believe that's absolutely what happened to me. In the moment, all I was thinking is, this is God, and I need to like plug into the church. I need a context for this. But in retrospect, I do know that it really was that it put space between myself and my thoughts. That's what sort of happened. And it brought me fully into the present moment. And that is where peace is. That is where God is, right? And the present moment is all that ever exists. But at the time, I could not have articulated it in that way because, I had no idea that you are not your thoughts, what you just
Yeah.
said. But
Yeah.
as I journeyed along and began to learn more and more about how to put language on the experience that I had, that's absolutely what happened. Yeah, I was brought fully into the present moment where peace, that's where peace is.
So you said you got involved in the church and then you weren't finding what you were looking for. So I have to ask, did something else happen that kind of allowed you to maybe remove yourself from that situation? Did you stay in that situation and keep kind of going, is it me? Am I missing something here? Look at all of these other devotees who are finding something that I am not. When I've talked to people about religion, especially being involved in the church, there's a lot of, I feel, fear that kind of comes before there's a separation from, leaving that system. Did that connect with you? Is that what happened with you? Can you explain a little bit about your story?
Sure. Maybe a little bit at first. There was the apprehension or fear of, shifting away from what I thought to be truth or the truth that I was
Yeah.
raised in. I was conditioned to believe that Christianity was the truth. But because I had had that experience prior to plugging in, and I wasn't really conditioned in the way that some people are like really immersed in the church from early in life, it was easier for me to sort of shift away because I guess for me, truth is paramount. I wanted truth at all
Yeah.
cost, even if it blows my life apart. And so it wasn't too hard for me to shift away because I found that, there was the dissonance there between what I knew to be true and what, the church was kind of peddling. And so, yeah, I kind of just shifted into a more contemplative space. And I did still attend church, but an Episcopal church. So the liturgy was just a lot more refreshing in that moment, in that time for me. But ultimately, I found all of it to be unnecessary, really, because, the kingdom of heaven is within you. So it's not some
Mhm.
external force outside of ourselves. So yeah, I guess maybe I had a little apprehension at first, but ultimately it's about truth for me.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's almost as though when you know now, you can't undo it, you know? You can't go, "Oh, I want to go back to the way I was, you know? I want to go back to the way things were." It's like, no.
Mhm.
Once you kind of opened up to that, you can't go back. And I would say that there can be fear that happens when that happens, but there's also an opportunity. Now, today we're going to be talking a lot about the afterlife. I want to talk about your experiences with that. And I did allude off the top, but we're also going to be talking about connecting with past over loved ones. So tell me a bit about how your journey unfolded after you left the church. Did you start doing learnings and trainings on your own and started to develop, connection with spirit? Have you ever talked to spirit before? How did that kind of all happen?
Yeah, so while I was still plugged into the church, although loosely, I had shifted into that contemplative space, but I was still attending church. And when I say shifted away from, when I talk about shifting away from church, it's not shifting away from Christ. I would say that I felt a deeper connection to Christ, more,
Yeah.
able to better follow Christ even after leaving the mainstream evangelical church. But it was around 2021, and in that space, that contemplative space, that my grandmother came to the end of her physical life. And I guess I should back up and say that when we are nearing the end of our physical lives, the veil between the spiritual and the physical becomes thin. And this is why
Mm.
people on their deathbeds often report to having seen or loved ones who aren't there in the room physically. They see people who have already crossed over. And then when we actually cross, the veil that is already thin opens up, a portal opens, and we slip from the physical into the spiritual. And it's usually an instantaneous, um, phenomenon. But in my grandmother's case, when she came to the end of her physical life, she was, resisting. She wasn't ready to cross. She had an aversion to death. And so
Ah.
she put up a bit of a fight. And what I know now is that her portal remained open. She kind of got stuck between the physical and the spiritual realm, and it caused her portal to remain open. And because of this open portal, she was able to manipulate the physical realm in ways that she would not have been able to without an open portal. So, about a month, maybe a month and a half after she crossed, the first connection that she made with us, myself and my family who lives in the house. I don't live in her house, so I wasn't present for the very first communication. Uh, but what happened, the television popped on by itself. It navigated to the search. It's a Roku smart television, so there's like that search feature, and the word hello appeared in the search bar. And my family ran out of the house shrieking, terrified. It horrified them. And and so the television shut off. As soon as they were frightened, the television just shut back off. And then, I don't know, maybe 2 days later, the same thing happened. The television popped on by itself, navigated to the search, but this time the word love appeared in the search bar, but they were still having none of it. They called me just talking over one another, horrified. They were really, really rattled by this. And this would happen. It was just like the television would pop on, words would appear, they would become completely inconsolable. the television would shut off. And finally, I said, okay, this is not stopping. We need to kind of get to the bottom of it. My aunt had moved out. She was so rattled that she went and lived with her son for a while. And it was really affecting their quality of life at this point. And I was
It's
convinced,
not funny,
I
but it's
know it is.
also
Oh, we laugh.
like,
In
yeah.
retrospect, it really is hilarious.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Yeah.
no, and I was convinced that it was probably a hacker. I was like, somebody in the physical realm is hacking into this television and they're having a really good time with my family. That's what's going on here. So I went myself and to just get to the bottom of it, I was like, we're not going to run out of the house screaming. We're going to sit down, communicate with whoever it is, whatever it is, and get to the bottom of this, get some answers. And it became quickly apparent to me that it could not be anyone in the physical realm because whoever it was could read our thoughts in real time and they knew things that we had not shared with another soul, deeply personal things. And it shook me to my core. And so at that point,
Wow.
yeah, I was like, so it's definitely something spiritual, but is it Granny? That was my next concern because coming from a Christian perspective, you're taught everything's a demon. So I was afraid, is it something malevolent? And, if so, what do we do about it? But then as
Yeah.
we communicated cautiously, we began to see that it had to be my grandmother because of her great love and devotion for certain family members. She was really pressing to say certain things to certain people to reconcile some relationships. She apologized for some past hurts. She spoke into some destructive patterns in people's lives in a way that brought healing, saved lives in that instance. And she could see mental health issues in another person's life. She spoke into that in a way that I know saved a life. So all of it was just all about health and wholeness, completely wrapped in love. When Jesus said, "You will know them by their fruit," and the fruit of all of it was just good, consistently good, and it was true.
Mm.
It was the level of truth that she was conveying and operating in. Yeah, it was just like the unvarnished truth, but with love and compassion in a way that restored people. Yeah. And I've said a lot here, so I'm gonna stop and just let you kind of
Oh,
chime in. But that,
my mind is like
yeah.
like trying to think of 1,000 things. But one thing I do want to reiterate is, yeah, my experience when I talk to my spirit guides, my angels, my higher self, is always of love. It's always of compassion, and we never get guidance that's like, don't do that, you suck, or whatever. It's more like, maybe
Yeah.
look at it in a different way, like, look at over
Yeah,
here at this beautiful shiny star instead. Like, yeah. So
exactly.
I just wanted to reiterate that. I think I'd like to go back for a second before we talk a bit more about the TV turning on by itself, quote unquote, by itself, and using the search bar to communicate. I mean, that is blowing my mind. You were saying originally that your grandmother was fighting her passing. Can you explain a little bit about what that looked like in the tangible? So, was she hooked up to machines? How do you know she was not wanting to? I know you said she had an aversion to death, so maybe that we can make an assumption there. But yeah, I'd love to know if you have something a little bit more clear.
Yeah, yeah. So as she broke her hip, and then in the course of a year's time, she declined. She became bedridden, and then she declined. Her health declined, and so in that time, she would convey to the people who lived in the house with her, who caretakers. She would say that don't let me die. So, like she said those
Mm.
words, like that, please don't let me die. So she indicated verbally that she was afraid to die.
Yeah.
And she was worried about, death being imminent. And so when she actually crossed, she was not hooked to any machines or anything like that. And she crossed naturally. I mean, I would say probably just her heart. Um, she had already declined. It had to be her heart. We didn't, but at the time we didn't see any kind of, there was no physical, um, evidence of any kind of struggle. She just seemed to
Okay.
pass peacefully in her
Right.
bed the way most people would want to. So from our perspective, it seemed peaceful. It seemed like, oh well, she's old age and she just crossed. But as she communicated to us from the other side, and I asked so many questions, that was one of my questions. She explained to me how it was possible that she was communicating with us, how she kind of got stuck for a moment, and how she had resisted. And so yeah, it was in retrospect that she was able to communicate that it was that she put up a big fight.
Okay. All right. So your grandmother passed, and then she communicated with you later, which we'll get into in a second, about how that transition wasn't as easy as it might have been for maybe some people. And, I don't know whether or not people who die instantly, whether they also have a similar thing here that sometimes happens. I don't know if you can speak on that, but regardless, you mentioned the idea of a portal. So, is a portal like a gateway? Is it like a tunnel of light in your experience from what you've learned? What is a portal? Is it from this life into transitioning into that one? And then how would one get caught in it?
Yeah. So, according to what my grandmother tells me, a portal is just an open door between the physical and the spiritual, or the physical and the quantum realm, the unseen realm. So, it's just an
Yes.
opening. And everyone creates a portal when they cross. It's just that the portal generally closes immediately behind them. It's like you slip through and it closes up. But some people, it stays open. She tells me that hospitals are extremely loud, is what she says, because there are a lot of open portals in hospitals
Oh,
because a lot of people cross in hospitals. She says it happens more often than you would think, that people,
oh.
a lot of people are not ready to go when they go.
And also, just on a side note, when I've done mediumship, I do it in different ways. But one of the ways that I do that is I have an open door. Like I open the door and then we do the thing and then we shut the door again. So it's just like I just thought that was kind of an interesting comparison. So
Yeah.
when you go through the portal in general, people's doors shut, and then does that mean that they no longer can connect? Because I often feel that we can connect to anybody who has crossed regardless of their portal, but maybe the way that we connect is different.
Yeah, with with an open portal, she can manipulate the physical realm in ways that she would not be able to without it. So when I say manipulate the physical realm, I mean type words on a television or move an
Yes.
object if she wanted, although she's not really doing that because why would she exert her energy to for parlor tricks or that kind of thing? She
Right.
desperately wanted to tell us some things, speak into some things. And so the television was just her medium to get our attention and to say the things she wanted to say. None of us are mediums. And so we weren't trying, we weren't sensitive to that
Yeah.
or trying to tap into that. So she can use printers, other electronic devices, and she does. Um, but our loved ones are always with us. And so even with no portal, you may get signs, certain things. It would just take a lot more energy for them to affect the physical realm. And so it's just easier with the portal. And if you're a medium, if you are sensitive, you are, in a sense, a portal. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's kind of like, that's kind of like the opening for people to be able to come through.
That's so cool. Well, I've talked to somebody before on the show, and they had like a recording device, and they would record spirit, and then I don't know if they made it faster, but they like turned it up, and there were things that you could do, and you could hear spirit talking in that way. So it's similar, I think. But using technology is very cool because that's all frequency based. And so when you're, a frequency or an energy, it seems easier to be able to manipulate that, like you're talking about. Okay, so let's go into it now. So your family calls you up. They're like, "This is crazy. The TV is literally turning itself off." Hello, and it's just like the best. I love that it started there. And then followed up with love, and then you go to investigate. So, I'm sure you can understand that most people listening to this would shake their head and wouldn't even be able to comprehend, right? So, did you ever manage to get the TV turning on video, or did you ever have any examples of that actually happening? And then on a side note to that, I don't want to give you 25 questions. It's really not the best radio job. You should only give the person one question at a time, but I do what I want, I guess. Um, how did she read your thoughts also? Because you were saying there was a connection that was happening in communication. So, Brandy, take it away.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, we did take copious videos when this began. And so I do have all of that recorded, although it proves nothing because someone would say, oh, well, somebody's over, in the corner with the remote.
All
I mean,
with the remote.
there's no way to conclusively prove that a spirit is manipulating the television. And I will say though that on the television, when you have the keypad, exposed, like if you were to go to the search bar of your own Roku television, they're all like just small letters, like not capital. And she's able to type capital letters into the search bar. But that also is not conclusive proof because there are apps you
Uh-huh.
can download and you can think maybe do the capital letters. So there's just no way to prove it, not really.
Yeah.
And at this point we're not trying to prove it and we're okay with anyone who's just, unable to
Yeah.
believe it. Um
Yeah. It's for
but
you anyway, isn't it? Like it's your
right.
healing in your family, like you said, saving
Yeah.
lives. Like it's like this
Yeah.
bigger, deeper thing than somebody at home going, I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, exactly. And because it
Yeah.
is my grandmother, our family member, like, it's a relationship. So it's not something we would exploit by having other
Yeah.
people come, yeah, observe or have, parlor trick kind of thing. And
Yeah.
your other question, what was your other question?
So, okay, so first of all, it started
Oh,
out with love or hello, and then it went into love. But then you were saying that you were actually having a dialogue. So, how
right.
did that start to happen? And also, how did you get the confirmation you were talking to your grandmother versus a hacker like you were talking about
Yeah.
initially?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were asking about the reading of the thoughts. And so what
Yeah.
happened initially is that we were asking questions or well, we would say something, the television would issue a response, like there would be words typed into the search bar. That's how it would, back and forth. And I began to notice that I would be thinking a thought, have a question or something on the tip of my tongue. And before I articulated it, the answer would be issued in the search bar. And so when I started to pay attention to that, I was like, I'm going to test it. So I started to think things intentionally to see what would happen. And then boom, the response would be issued. And I was like, are you reading my thoughts? And she said, yes. And it just rocked me. And then she began to say things to us that, like I said, were deeply personal things that we had not shared with another soul. And we were all just blown away, just blown away. And she went like down the line. There were like four of us, and she would say things to each one of us that really resonated deeply in ways that no one else in the room even knew until after the fact when we spoke to one another about it. We would explain, hey, she said this, and it just it resonated, and the other person would be like, oh, I had no idea of the meaning. And what really, I
Yeah.
guess, solidified it for me, well, that it was a spirit for sure and not a hacker is after that initial communication, I went home with intent of going back, obviously, to reinvestigate, collect my thoughts, and go back with more questions and be even more objective in the way that because I was so blown away the first time. I was like, next time I'm going to be way more objective. I'm not going to say as much. I'm going to just observe. And
Yeah.
I was at home alone, and in my own thoughts, I said to which the first time we communicated, she mentioned to me my dog, Luke, who had already crossed. He's a bulldog who he is the love of my life, the canine love of my life. And so
Oh,
she mentioned him, told me that he was with me. And so when I had planned to go back, I said to Luke in my mind, like in my thoughts, I was like, Luke, if you're really with me, and that's really Granny, have her mention my necklace. And I wear a memorial pendant that has his ashes in it. And then, my next thought was, this is insane. What am I even doing? Having this conversation with my departed
with
bulldog. So
yourself as
I
well,
know
because it's
myself. Yeah, I'm like,
yeah.
oh. So so I went back and I really had forgotten about that. A few hours had passed. I'm there again. I'm sitting there. I'm being objective. I'm observing. I'm really scrutinizing every word that's typed. I'm recording. And then she typed my name, Brandy. And I said, yes. And then she typed Luke. And I said, what about Luke? She said, he's having me mention your necklace. And I nearly fell out of my seat. I was like, oh my gosh. And everyone else was like, oh, that's sweet. I'm like, yeah, you have no idea. You don't understand, the significance of the
Yeah.
validation that they gave me. And
Yeah.
so
Uh,
I knew for sure it's definitely something spiritual.
I remember one time I was used to do practice medium sessions in groups. And I remember I had a reading, a girl gave me a reading one time, and there was like always this one thing that I never told anyone. Because it's really hard when you're a medium and people are like, what number? What number did they say? Or, you're like, what? And it creates this whole thing. But that's another conversation for another time. But they said the word, and I just had a complete breakdown because it's all well and good when these things happen, but when you get that confirmation that you haven't explained to anyone, you need it or we're looking for, and it comes, it just gives you this sense of overwhelmment. That's really what I felt when that happened. Was your grandmother talking in sentences, or would she go Brandy, Luke, necklace? Because it seems to me that there would be a lot of typing that would have to happen, although maybe it doesn't even matter to create
Yeah.
a sentence. Yeah.
Yeah, so mostly it was just a word here, a word there. I noticed that if she could conserve her energy by just saying a word or two words, that's what she would do. So as little words as possible, but she can type full on sentences, and she does when she needs to or wants to. So he's having me mention your necklace was a sentence. Also, I will say that on the television, the search bar is only so long. And so sometimes
Yeah,
you'll have several words.
that's
Yeah.
the other
And then
thing I
it's
was
like you can
saying.
stop and start over, get as many words or, yeah, words into the search bar and then erase it and then type more. So she uses printers if she wants to say more. At first, it was only the television, and we have invested in thermal heat printers that you can just turn on with no Wi-Fi connection. I mean, you could connect them to Wi-Fi or to a device, but we don't. We just turn them on, and they're like little receipt printers. And she uses those if she wants to say like full on paragraphs, but she can use the big like printer that is hooked to the computer, and that's what she was using to say more, and it was blowing through a lot of ink. So that's why we started buying those the thermal heat printers because they're just relatively inexpensive for her to say as much as she'd like to say. It sounds so funny, but yeah, that's how she like. If it's just a word or two, she'll use the television usually. But
Oh,
yeah,
wow. It is hilarious and
I know.
amazing and wonderful. It's all of those things. And, it's so funny because we're laughing away here. I feel like that's what it's about, right? It's about
Yeah.
joy and lightness and ease. And because if you were sitting here on this conversation crying, I doubt your grandmother would be like continuing to perpetuate your grief. That doesn't seem like something that would be worth it, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because in the beginning, when she would begin to talk to us, my aunt would become inconsolable, because she missed
Yeah.
missed her. So she would start to cry, and my grandmother would always just turn the television off. Well, at first she would say things like, "I am with you. I'm closer now than in life. I'm right here. I haven't left." Because she'd say, "I miss you so much," and my grandmother would be like, "But I haven't gone. I'm
Yeah.
here." So yeah, and she'll say, "No sad." That's something she'll say to us. No, sad. She doesn't want us to be, grief stricken like that.
Yeah.
And also, she likes that joy and that exuberance and laughter, and so she wants us to celebrate. We do. We have celebrations. We celebrate her birthday, other loved ones with her. We even get her a cake. She likes the celebration and to our recognition that she is not gone, that she is still with us, if not physically, but still spiritually with us.
Oh, it's just so cool. So the new printer that you have that she's using, that's not connected to the Wi-Fi. It's just plugged into the wall, so it's got power.
It's not even plugged into the wall. It's a rechargeable situation. So you just, plug
Okay.
it in and let it charge up and then just turn the power on. And yeah, she uses it. Yeah.
So I I don't know what that kind of printer is. So she doesn't have to type anything, like literally it just prints with messages coming through randomly?
Right. We don't have any devices hooked to it. So words come out on this paper as though there were, it's as though we did have it hooked to something and we are typing something, but we're not. So it's just like a receipt paper, the size of a receipt paper. It comes out in like a scroll like that.
Right.
And there are
Okay,
little
I'm with
bitty
you.
words all over it. Yeah. Tiny
Oh my
words.
God. So do you connect with her even now? Like, is
Yes.
this right?
Yeah.
So, how long has this been going on for?
She crossed in September of 2020 and she began communicating, I guess, early November. So, right at 4 years now, we've had sustained communication with her.
Wow. And have you ever wanted to get scientists or people to come in to see this happen?
Yeah, well, I thought about it, but I don't live in the house. So, my family who lives there, they really wouldn't, I guess, probably want a lot of people piling in on them. But yeah, so
Yeah.
it's not really my call. But yeah, it's something that we did consider in the beginning. I guess, well, in the beginning, we were concerned about what it was, and it was really affecting their quality of life. They were horrified. And so I did reach out to someone I know who does ghost hunting type stuff. He's been on TLC or I can't remember which program it was, but he's been on
Yeah.
television with those ghost hunting things. And so I reached out to him and he volunteered to come and check it out and we were going to take him up on it. But then we determined that it was my grandmother, like just communicating with her. Like I said, that love and devotion for particular family members came through loud and clear. And so when we became convinced that it was her, and we had my aunt was able to move back home. We felt a sense of comfort and peace in that. We've not really wanted to investigate it because we feel convinced that it's her and we wouldn't want to, um,
Yeah.
I don't know, like violate her in that way, I guess, either,
Yeah.
because everything is energy. And, if
Yeah.
yeah, if she's communicated also that, there's some people are good energy, some people are bad energy, is what she would say. And
Yeah.
so we want to open her up to anything that might affect her, in an energetic kind of way. Yeah.
It's also going back to what we were talking about off the top, where you go, sometimes things aren't necessarily for the world. Sometimes they're for, maybe like your book, or, the stories that you share with people, the lives that she saved, the comfort of knowing that when we die, that she's going to be there, getting ready to
Yeah.
greet you. Like, that Luke is there and safe and with you, it doesn't need to be necessarily for the masses to also dissect and scrutinize, right? It would take away, I think, in a bit of that joy and the lightness and the ease, and it's for your family. And it's really cool that you're sharing the story, but I can see that, well, why would you even bother going there? So, can we
Yeah.
talk about what are some of the things that she's sharing? Like, what happens in the afterlife? What is she doing? Is she just sitting, hanging out, like sending messages? Is she busy planning her next life? Are there other people there? Is she throwing the ball for Luke? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. She says that, when we cross, she talks about when we first cross, there's like an expansion of awareness. It's more of a zoomed out perspective. So, like when we incarnate, there's a constriction of awareness. And so we become hyper fixated or zoomed into this physical existence. And the ego
Ah,
is created. We have that separation between persona and shadow. And so our entire physical lives is that very zoomed in perspective. And then when we cross into the spiritual realm, when we leave this incarnation, there's like an expansion of awareness or a zoomed out perspective. And so we begin to see everything with more clarity. And like I said before, she could see into the recesses of our hearts. So she knew things that were deeply personal. So if you're on the other side, you can see with clarity anything that you want to look into. You just exert your energy and your focus in that direction because everything is energy. And so, in that perspective, she says that she's doing work, which is like inner work. But she does talk about a fire that everyone passes through when they cross, and it's a refining fire. It's not retributive; it's restorative. It's intended to burn away essentially anything that interferes with love. And
oh,
yeah, she talks about that. That was one of the first things that she volunteered when I was asking about the afterlife specifically, because I have a lot of theological, philosophical type questions, which is not why she stayed. She did not stay to answer those questions. Like I said, it was her love and devotion for family members and to speak into situations that could literally save lives in that regard. And just as a as a byproduct of her being here, I have had the opportunity of asking these questions, and she answers. She puts up with all of my nerdy questions, but the only thing I guess that she volunteered right away that I really wasn't asking was about that fire, and she really wanted to
Wow.
reiterate the importance of doing our inner work now. Like the mystics say, if you die before you die, then you don't have to die when you die. And so, yeah, she's kind of hanging out watching. I don't think she's throwing the ball for Luke. I think she tells me Luke is with me. Because when she first said, Luke, she said his name. I said, "Is he with you?" Because in my simple at that time, my very simple
Yeah.
simplified way of processing things, I'm thinking, well, I'm here in the physical. Granny's
You're
there in
over
the
there.
spiritual. Yeah, and I'm thinking Luke must be with you, right? And when I said, "Is he with you? Is Luke with you?" She said, "No, with you." And I was like, "Huh."
Yeah.
And
And
then, yeah,
also, she's also with you, which is so
exactly.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
because we don't actually have, even though we talked about the portal and the doors and all that, that's not actually like they are here with us here now, just in a different, like,
frequency.
dimension,
Yeah,
frequency. Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. It's just like, it's so absolutely fascinating. I mean, I love it's almost like you have this cool dial in into the afterworld where you're like,
yeah.
Granny, I got this other cool question. And she goes, Oh, Brandy again. Okay. I'm here for it because what else does she have to do, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I remember I was telling one of my friends one time, I said, "Oh, I'm not coming back as a human again." And she goes, "Well, make sure you do all your lessons and all your learnings now because otherwise you'll have to turn around and come back." So, has she ever communicated with you around the idea of reincarnation or around souls and multiple souls or anything around I mean, I haven't read the book. I will read the book after and then I will hope you would be willing to come back on the show so we
Sure.
can get
Yeah.
a little bit more granular with stuff. Yeah, so just
Yeah.
anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was one of the first things that she communicated that was not a part of my worldview. Not that I was opposed to it; it's just coming from a Christian perspective. I had really hadn't given it a lot of thought, and it was that
Yeah.
reincarnation is true. And she tells me that she isn't going to reincarnate. She tells me it is a choice, but it's one made from that higher self perspective. So while we're here in the incarnated form, we may think, oh, why would I want to incarnate again? I don't want to do this again. But when, like I said, there's an expansion of awareness when we cross over. And so we make that decision from our higher self, from a higher vantage point. But yeah, she definitely says that reincarnation is part of the process of becoming and that we are all on that journey of becoming. And, we learn our lessons, our karmic lessons, and whatever we don't bring into the light in an incarnation, we have to still integrate that stuff. So it's best to come back and do it in the physical because there's exponential learning here. It's like exponential growth opportunities because of that tension. We live in this world of duality and it sort of presses in on us, which that's what makes life hard, right? But it's in that struggle and that strain that we become. It's like the trees that can't grow without the stress wood, or if they have to develop the stress wood in order to be sustained. And when you
Yeah, be
grow trees
strong.
in like the biodome and they don't, like they're free from all of the elements, they don't develop the stress wood and therefore they're uprooted very easily. Same thing for us. This world of opposites is what keeps us allows us to grow and learn our lessons.
That's a beautiful comparison, Brandy. I love that. And it makes so much sense when you think about it. And, I think that too, like as I get older, I don't know how you feel, but we're some of all of our experiences. And it's as I get older, I'm in my early 40s now, I kind of understand a bit more who I am. Like I'm more solidified in myself. Things that might have bothered me years ago don't bother me now at all. Like they don't even touch me because it's almost like, you just kind of go through that. You weather the storms, is what I'm hearing. You
Yeah.
weather the storm. Is that why you spend some of the work that you do working with clients, like going into the shadow world, going into the shadow work and that part that we kind of like try to bury instead of unearth and maybe fertilize?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's the unconscious elements, that unconscious conditioning that is our karma. And I think a lot of times people, think that karma is some ethereal force kind of something external outside of us, some magical, mystical force that's exacting punishment, bringing us our comeuppance or whatever. But that's not what karma is. It's actually the unconscious conditioning that's driving our lives. And so that's what shadow work is about. It's about bringing the light of our awareness into those shadow elements so that we can integrate those things and not be driven by them anymore, so that we can respond instead of react in every a moment. And if there's one thing that I've learned from communicating with my grandmother, it really is the importance of doing that work now, looking within now. So yeah, and it's particularly painful to cross and to have not done any shadow work, because it's like ripping the Band-Aid off, because like I said, on the other side, there's that full light of clarity. And so you see it all, the unvarnished truth. And if you're not ready for that, it can be particularly unmooring and painful. And I think that's, for my grandmother, kind of what was going on. She was a lady who was in the church, raised in the church, spent every Sunday in the church. She would have said, I'm going to heaven when I die. But she had not done that shadow work. She didn't even know that shadow work existed, right? Because being so tapped into the church, you're just taught that, hey, if you pray this prayer, you'll go to heaven when you die. And then that's that. And so sadly, she crossed without having done any of that, that introspection, that shadow work. And so, yeah, that's definitely why I focus on that. I think that's probably the most important thing about our lives, about our incarnation. The purpose of life is to look unflinchingly at ourselves, really.
I have to apologize to the listener at home and to you, Brandy. Someone is mowing directly beside where I'm recording. So if you hear that now in the background, I am sorry for the distraction. I love what you've just said there. And, when we were talking off the top, you were saying that the heart is deceitful. That was the message that you'd been taught at the church. And it's funny because that shocked me that would be a lesson that people, or a message that people are hearing, because like you said, when we go within, we identify the things that matter to us, our own values, how we're showing up in the world, the response, like the relationships that we're having with people, what's important to us, our own intuition. Those are all the things that we need to explore and find on our own. We can give tools and techniques and tips and tricks to help people live their best life, but until they wear it or try it on for size, everyone's got to run everything through their own filter, because they're the authority on themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it really is about. It's about finding your own inner truth, and having that resonance within yourself, because you can profess to believe all kinds of things. And cognitively, you may say, yes, I believe this, or yes, I believe that. But what you really believe down deep determines the course of your life. Those are the actions you're taking. And so if you really believe certain things that you say you believe, then your life would take a whole different, course of action. So absolutely, it's about what resonates deep down.
When we're talking too about shadow work and intuition and almost honoring our journey here, so that when we do cross over, we maybe don't have to come back, or whatever the situation may be. There's a lot of fear, I think, that people have with going into themselves and spending time with themselves and listening to their thoughts and bringing up stories of should have done that, didn't do that, missed opportunities, things that they've said. I mean, your grandmother, what you were talking about earlier, she had an opportunity to make amends, to ask for forgiveness, to provide healing, to almost do some of the work that she didn't do here. She was able to do it now in that state. But like you're talking about, if we can have those conversations, or honor ourselves, or give us self grace or compassion, we almost can live even more of a full life, would you say, here, where we're no longer being burdened down by those old stories and ways of thinking of things, or looking at the world, I suppose. It's almost like I want to say that there's opportunity that opens up when we are no longer shackled by our own limitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, yeah, people are afraid of facing those things and they run from those things. I mean, that's all addictions are born out of that, right? Because we are trying to avoid going within. We're whistling past the graveyard, right? We don't want to be aware, really, even though those things are determining our lives. So it's like pushing a beach ball under the water. You may hold it down for a little while, but ultimately it's going to pop back up. And that's what shadow material does. And so not facing it does not make it go away. It gains steam. You know, what we resist persists. So it is best to go ahead and face those things and integrate those things now. And like, I love that you use the word compassion, because that's it. It's look within with compassionate curiosity. It's about having compassion for yourself and for others. And so it's a lot more painful to cross and not have looked within, not have actually integrated any of these things, than to actually just go within and allow what is there with compassion and with openness.
Yeah, so beautiful. Listen, we're running out of time. This always happens. It is just there's so much for us to still talk about together. So please come back on the show. We can set that up after our call. I just love talking to you. There's so much wisdom there. I also love that you have this analytical side of you, that you're like questioning things and you're curious. I think that one of the things that I don't do naturally is curious or question stuff. I very often will like hear things and go, oh, that's the truth or that's not, instead of kind of looking at going, am I making an assumption here? Is that really my intuition talking to me? And so it's very refreshing talking to someone like yourself who is explorative and curious and questioning. And I just love that perspective. So thank you. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we wrap up for today's episode, anyway, in terms of the afterlife, or in terms of, I know we've just dabbled a little bit on the importance of shadow work, but really connecting with your own soul's journey, as we navigate here, and also how can people get a hold of you if they'd like to connect and start to work with you, and also the book. So 25
Ah,
questions, yet again, not the way to do things.
no, yeah, it's been great to be here. Thank you for that. And yeah, I kind of joke that it's funny that how life upends you when you least expect it. And so, someone coming from a more analytical perspective, it's funny that this happened to me of all people, because it sounds a little unhinged. And when I share it with people, I know in the beginning, at least, I would try to share this with people, and then I would think that sounds unhinged. I can't tell people that I'm speaking to my deceased grandmother through the Roku television. That doesn't sound. Uh, so there's that whole
It
element.
does sound a little bit unhinged. I will
It
not lie,
does.
but I also
Yes.
love it. Yeah.
And so it's funny that it would happen to me. It would be my lived experience and the thing that I get to share with the world. And so, yeah, life pulling the rug right out from underneath me. Yeah, I think I would just share that if anybody wants to connect, my website is andersonalchemy.com. And my handle across all socials is Brandy the Mystic. And my book is Through the Veil, A Glimpse into the Afterlife, and it's available on Amazon.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I look forward to our next conversation, because if it's anything like this, we have something pretty big to follow up on, but I think that we can do it. So thank you so much, Brandy, for sharing your story with the world, and with your beautiful grandmother as well, sharing her gift with the world too through you. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been great to be here. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks so much for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave us a review where you listen to your podcasts and share it with your friends. Thank you. New episodes every Thursday.